It's a really interesting look at regulation. He's going to talk about different ad campaigns that have probably made some unsubstantiated claims around sort of ethics and the environment. And he's also going to take a sort of an interesting look into the future of what might be tomorrow's taboo subjects in advertising campaigns. And then 2 weeks after that, we've got an A to Z of gaming and esports, if you like. So that one's not online yet, but keep an eye out for it. But today's very popular because it's about listening. Now, listening, we have a training schedule at the Alliance, and when we put that together, we research it, and quite often you'll go to talk to people in agencies, and listening will be referred to as, do you know what, those traditional skills, listening, you know, or the old school skills of, yeah, we need to build, you know, the youngsters in the agency need to get better at listening, or it's a soft skill. We don't believe it's any of those. It's not a soft skill, and it's not a traditional skill. It's a vital skill, whether it's dealing with clients or with colleagues and working on a brief internally. So we wanted to cover it in some way. And look, anyone else is going to teach you about listening, another trade body, they're going to equip you to go in and negotiate with a fearsome procurement officer. What are they going to, they might even pull in a procurement officer, right? But not us. It's not good enough for us. We're pulling in a hostage negotiator to come and talk to you about listening. So that's who we've got today. I'm going to hand over in a moment to Kevin Taylor, and we've just been catching up, and this is going to be really interesting. So Kevin has spent 27 years in the police, worked his way through the ranks, was a chief inspector, but more interestingly for this session, he was a hostage negotiator. So if we're going to talk to somebody about listening skills, who better to have, right, than a hostage negotiator? Usual kind of rules, I suppose, apply. It's really nice seeing everybody on the call. It's great if you can leave your video on. I totally get it if you can't. And but please do click mute, because it's easy for Kevin to talk to us all if there's no background noise. But it is interactive in some respects. So if you've got any questions that you want to put to Kevin, pop them in the chat room as and when you go, and you can put the question to everybody. If you want, you can just put it to me, just say to Matt Sullivan, and I can ask it on your behalf, of course. And Kevin and I have agreed that we'll keep a bit of time towards the end for a bit of a Q&A. That really is it from me. We've got another training session that Kevin's going to run, if you want to go into this a little bit deeper, and I'll tell you about that at the end. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I'm looking forward to this. Are you all right if I just hand over to you for now?
Yeah, fine, Matt. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot. Okay. Over to you.
Evening, guys. I should probably start with an apology, really, because you'll have seen the preamble go out around a hostage negotiator, and thanks to Hollywood, you may well have been expecting Bruce Willis or Samuel L. Jackson or Russell Crowe to be sat here, and unfortunately, you've got me. So whenever this comes about, there's usually a few disappointed faces on the cameras. So clearly not Bruce Willis. But all I will say is that there's no one more disappointed than me that I'm not Bruce Willis. So, well, perhaps my wife and definitely my accountant, but well, that's another story. So hostage negotiation. Yeah, as Matt said, I was a police officer for 27 years. How do you get into hostage negotiation? So for me, it wasn't kind of the traditional route, I suppose. It was a little bit of a different route. I had, and I chatted to Matt earlier, and I think it's worth discussing it. I had imposter syndrome, and I know it's something that is quite prevalent at the moment with people feeling that, am I good enough to be doing what I'm doing? And I had imposter syndrome, and it held me back for 18 years in the police. So when I joined the cops, I joined in the mid 80s, giving my age away. And it was a very different organisation than it is now. But my dad died when I was 4 years old. My mum brought three of us up on her own. So at 16 years old, she said, go and get a job, which is exactly what I did. Come 21 years of age, I decided I was going to join the police. If I'm honest, I have no real reason why I wanted to join the police. But I decided I was going to join the cops, and I went for the selection process, went through the application, went for an initial interview, literacy and numeracy tests, passed those, went for assessment weekend, passed those, went for my final interview. And on my final interview, a panel of 3 people, the chief inspector sat in the middle, right at the very end, asked me why I'd never furthered my education. And I answered honestly and said, well, not that you can tell now, I used to do a lot of martial arts. I work 6 days a week and I train 3 or 4 times a week. So on the day that I have off, I go out with my friends. And he took exception to it and absolutely destroyed me. Sat in the chair in front of him across the desk, he absolutely destroyed me. People like you shouldn't be in the police. People like you aren't clever enough. If it was up to me, you'd never have got through the application process. If it was up to me, you won't be sat here now, you'd be gone. And this went on, this bollocking, because that's exactly what it was, went on for a good 3 or 4 minutes before he eventually got that angry with himself that he threw his pen down on the desk and said, in fact, I don't know what to do with you. Get out and wait in the corridor. And I got sent out and got stood in a corridor. I don't think they interview like this anymore in the police, but they did back then. I stood in a corridor for a couple of minutes, then got wheeled back in, got sat back down, and got another dressing down. Until the last 30 seconds when he said to me, these 2 really like you and think I should give you a chance. But I'm telling you now, I'll be watching you, I'll be seeing how you progress, and if you struggle in any way, you'll be gone. Is that clear? And that was my welcome to the police. You've done a great job. And I didn't realise at the time the damage that had done to me. So year after year, I finished my probationary period. Then you move on to annual appraisals. And year after year, I got told, Kev, you should take your exams. You really switched on. You could go find this job. And year after year, I came up with an excuse not to do it. I came up with excuse after excuse. I've changed shift. I've just started at the time. Response policing's on the TV a lot these days. It wasn't a thing back then. It was a double crewed vehicle that went to all the kind of high risk treble 9 incidents, which was called the 01 van. I want to do the 01 van. I've just started on the 01 van. And at the risk of everybody switching off, I've just started on traffic. I was a traffic cop for a long time. I'm a self-confessed real petrol head. And believe you me, there is no better job in the police for a petrol head than being on traffic. You get all the best cars to drive, and who's going to stop you for speeding? Nobody, because you've got the speed gun. So I spent a long time on traffic, and it was whilst I was on traffic that I got involved in negotiation, my first negotiation. And the first negotiation I ever did was by far the most difficult negotiation. Difficult for a number of reasons. I'd had no training whatsoever. The guy was armed with a military automatic shotgun. He had 2 police officers held hostage. Just like the movies, he wanted a car. If he didn't get a car, he was going to blow one of the officers' heads off. I'd had no training, and I was the one with the gun at the back of my head. So the first negotiation I ever did was for my life and for that of a fairly new cop that I had in the car with me at the time. He'd come out with Lucky Kev to see what traffic cops got up to of a night time. I'd asked him when we were driving around, why have you joined the police? And he said, I thought it'd be exciting. Well done. Tick that one for you straight away. That for me, though, I make light of it, but it was a catalyst for me to change where I was going in my career. And I don't recommend it as a means of getting over imposter syndrome by any means, but it refocused where I was going. I took my exams. I went into the city centre of Manchester, and having been promoted to the rank of sergeant, I got introduced to the negotiator team. And from there, I found my niche in the police without a shadow of a doubt. I was very fortunate. I was saying this to Matt earlier, and it sounds very wrong to say it out of a policing context, but I was really fortunate that when I first started on the team, I got involved in some really good kidnaps. Now, clearly not very good for the person that was taken, but from a learning perspective, it completely opened my eyes to a new discipline within policing. And I spent the rest of my career ensuring that wherever I worked, I could continue negotiating. Because there are one or two full-time negotiators throughout the country, but predominantly negotiators do the role over and above their core role. So my core role was intelligence manager for the city. But whenever I moved, I ensured that I could carry on negotiating because it was the thing that kind of piqued my interest. The things I learned as a negotiator translate completely into your world. And that may seem strange for me to say to you. But when you look at it, you guys sell ideas. You sell ideas to people. The core difference is that you sell ideas to people that are in the market for or open to what you're suggesting. In my world, it's quite the opposite. And as the session's title is, Negotiate with Nothing to Offer, that's because I really had nothing to offer. So there are two disciplines within the hostage negotiation. There's crisis negotiation and there's kidnap negotiation. Crisis negotiation is people who are suicidal, people who are going to take their own life, people who are what we call a barricade siege, so someone who's barricaded themselves in their own home or somebody else's home. Bank sieges are very rare indeed, any kind of commercial siege, usually domestic related sieges. And people that are wanted. So whenever you see the news and you see the police are looking for an individual, do not approach, etc., etc., there's a negotiator team working in the background to engage with those people. That's crisis negotiation. And the basis of that is built on truth, on telling the truth. Then there's kidnap negotiation. And kidnap negotiation is, as it says, is that negotiating through kidnaps. It's the same use of the skills, but in a very different way. And what I mean by that is, here's a question for you guys to think about. You don't need to answer, but here's a question for you guys. Is there a difference between influence and manipulation? Because you're in the business of influencing people. For me, I believe there is. And crisis negotiation is about influence. Kidnap is about manipulation. Because when you look at what I've got to offer, in a kidnap, I've got 15 years to life in prison, which is not the best starting point from a negotiation perspective. In a crisis, in a siege, I've got prison. People get prison in the UK. And for a suicide intervention, I've got life to someone who doesn't want it and hope to someone who's got none whatsoever. So you have to look at negotiation differently. The one skill that transcends both of those disciplines is listening. It is absolutely the core skill of a negotiator. It is a complete fallacy that negotiators talk people out. Hostage negotiators don't talk people out, they listen people out. Because when people talk to you, they give away everything you need to know to influence them. So when you look at, and Matt mentioned it before, when you look at listening and communication as a skill, people often talk about it being a soft skill. From my world, it's anything other than a soft skill. And I'll give you a scenario, an incident that I dealt with. So the scenario was this. It is a guy who's in a barricade siege. He's barricaded himself in his own home. He has his partner in the address with him. He's armed with a handgun, which is unusual in the UK. There's a firearm siege around a firearm cordon around the address. And the firearms officer's saying he's tapped the gun several times against the window. We are adamant it's a live weapon. He's told the firearms officers that he's turned the gas on in the house. He's been seen to pour petrol around the windows, around the door, and over his girlfriend. And from her reaction, the team were adamant that it was fuel that had been poured over her. And his threat was this: anybody comes in this house or anybody leaves this house and I will blow it up. When you look at communication in that context, in my world, we're talking about tactical options. Tactical option in this case will be a firearms entry to go in and get the guy out. There is no tactical option in this event because of the nature of the incident. So what happens is the negotiator team are deployed and we arrive on scene and engage with this individual. When you look at communication in that context, because that's all we have is the power of our voice and our ability to listen. When you look at communication in that context, it is anything other than a soft skill. It is absolutely the most powerful tool you guys have got. What we do is we expect people to understand it and use it because, as Matt said, it's old school skills, it's natural. Yeah, we all do it. It is a skill, and like any other skill, if you practice and if you get good at it, then it becomes more powerful. For anybody who reads Mandarin, for me, when you look at listening, we often say 2 of these, 1 of these. When you look at the Chinese written language, the word for listening or to listen, for me, absolutely typifies what listening is. In fact, I'll share a slide so you can see it. Can everybody, can we see that, Matt? I've lost you guys now.
No, I can't see that yet.
Okay, let me see if we can try that one again. Bear with me a second, it's for some reason not playing. No, I'm not going to show you that because for some reason it stopped sharing. We tried it just before and it worked perfect.
It worked, didn't it?
Yeah, never mind. So I'll describe it to you. You can search it online. It's written in traditional Mandarin, okay? So when you look at the Chinese written language, they reckon it's anywhere between 2,500 and 3,500 years old. And to make certain words, they put other words together. So everybody familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay, so the bottom layer, comfort, warmth, food. The Chinese written word for happiness is made up of 3 words: clothing, mouth, food. Those 3 words put together form happiness. The word for listening or to listen is made up of 5. And the 5 words are these: eyes, ears, heart, undivided attention, and you. Those 4 are your responsibility. So when you look at it, eyes is what you're seeing. You can argue that that's body language. Ears, what you're hearing being said. Heart, bring that into our world in the 21st century, emotional intelligence, emotional awareness. Undivided attention. And you. Those 4 are your responsibility. How many times when you have walked in to speak to somebody and you've said to them, I've got something really important to say, and they're typing away on the computer and they say, yeah, go on, I'm listening to you. They're not, they're typing. Yeah, if you are going to listen to people, give them your undivided attention. We listen in 6 different ways. We have 6 modes with which we listen. And depending upon which mode you're in, will quite literally depend on what you hear the other person saying. What I say to negotiators when I'm training new negotiators, I'm still involved in the training of kidnap negotiators and hostage and crisis negotiators. The first thing I say to them is this: when you're learning to listen, the first task for you guys is to understand yourself, understand who you are. And what I mean by that is not have a look at yourself and think, what am I good at, what am I not so good at? Hold a mirror up to yourself. Have a really good look at yourself and understand what it is you like about yourself, what it is you don't like about yourself, what is it that other people don't like about you, what it is about other people you don't like. Because all those things impact on how we listen. Because we can very easily get into what's called a combative listening mode. And what happens when we're in that mode is we hear disagreement or confirmatory listening. And lots of people drop into confirmatory listening. When you guys go and pitch, when you go and speak to a client, you have your agenda. If you are focused on your agenda, you will listen for the things that confirm what you want to hear. And what you will miss are the things the other person is telling you. So when you have nothing to offer, you have to listen to it from their perspective. If I'm going to sell you guys an idea, And that's all I ever did as a negotiator, the same as you guys, was sell an idea, usually to someone who didn't want it. But if I'm going to sell you an idea, if I try and sell it from my value perspective, you can all argue with it. You can argue with it every day of the week because they're my values. It's what's important to me. If I can understand your values and work out your motivations and your fears, and then I sell my idea based on those, it is infinitely more attractive to you because they're your values. It makes sense to you and it resonates with you. When people talk, they will give things away. The first thing you have to do is understand yourself at that level. And what I would urge every one of you to do is sit in a room on your own. Don't do it with your partners or your significant others, because what you will write down then is what you expect them to want to know. Sit on your own and write down and be honest with yourself. There is no right or wrong. But the important thing is to understand. Because what happens is, and you will have all done this, when the words leave your mouth and they land with the other person, the voice in your head says, oh, they didn't like that. Because you spot the reaction very quickly. We see it in other people. We're brilliant at seeing it in other people. What we don't see is it in ourselves. And we leak. And what I mean by leaking is our tone changes, our listening mode changes to be combative or passive, which is tuning out. So understand yourself so that you can recognize people you don't like will still wind you up. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. People that just push your buttons will still push your buttons. You will catch yourself quicker. What I would say is that there is absolutely no cookbook approach to this. There are no Jedi mind tricks that I can teach you tonight that allow you to wave your hand and get every contract that you go for. It's about listening. I used to use a variation of the same line every time. Because when you first go out to somebody who is either at a siege, or when you go to meet a family for a kidnap, or you turn out to somebody who's suicidal, when you first meet them, there's one hell of an adrenaline kick. When you walk out onto the top landing of a car park where someone's on the wrong side of a railing on a 3-inch ledge, you've got to get your words out clearly. And what happens when adrenaline kicks in is your vocal cords tighten up, your voice goes up a couple of octaves, and the lines that you've practiced in your head that sound fantastic come out muddled up, sounding like Joe Pasquale. So I would practice the line that I would use to calm myself down. And the line was this: my name's Kev. I've come here today to find out what's got you here. Why don't you just step over to this side and we'll go and talk about it. I got deployed out to a guy who was on top of a building. He was on a flat roof, stood on a kind of a square stone platform. When I arrived at the scene, no one was talking to him. We'd got access to the roof, and I went out and I said to him, hello, mate, my name's Kev. I'm just trying to find out what's happened to get you here today. Why don't you step down and we'll go and talk about it over here? And he looked back at me and he said, okay. And he climbed down. 20 seconds. And we walked off, and I said, why didn't you come down before? And he said, well, I just thought with all the police being there, I should stay where I was. Yeah, brilliant. I learned very quickly at that point, the first question I always asked when I got a phone call in the middle of the night was, has anyone asked them to come down? And you will be surprised at how many times I would get a phone call back saying, you can cancel. The lesson in there is this: don't negotiate if you don't have to. Don't think you're in a negotiation, because you might not be. Interestingly though, that line had never worked before, and it never worked again afterwards. But for that one guy, that was all they needed. And this is why there's no cookbook approach to it, because every single person you deal with will be different. Your job is to work them out as individuals. The danger of being in in a position for too long is that you set your own style, and you will all develop your own style. Absolutely no problems with that. But the skill set is to not become rigid. Here's a question to consider for you. Another question for you guys to have a think about. Is there a difference, or what is the difference between confidence and arrogance? Because one's positive, one definitely isn't. And for me, the difference is this: learning, constantly developing yourself. If you get set in your way, you will develop a routine, and it will become my way or the highway. When you tune into that and you allow your ego to take over, you start to tune out the things other people are saying. And you will sit yourself in a confirmatory listening mode every day of the week, hearing the things you want to hear because you know you're right. What you're missing is what the person's saying. Every one of you will have heard, I'm saying every one of you, I'm guessing you will have heard of active listening. It's a term that's banded around a lot. And when you ask people what their understanding of active listening is, they will say, oh, it's nodding your head, making eye contact, showing them that you're listening. Yeah. And if for the person that fell asleep during the training session, they usually come out with oh, it's when you listen actively, isn't it? Yeah. So, but it's the key skill of a negotiator. We spend 2 full days just learning active listening skills, what the individual skills are, before we then practice every single day, 1 hour in the morning, 3 hours at night. That's how important listening is as a hostage negotiator. Because before you can influence somebody, you have to understand who they are. You have to understand what their motivations are, what their fears are, what the barriers are to stopping them from saying yes to you. No different in my world. Before I'm going to get somebody to come down or release a hostage or accept what we're offering in a kidnap, I have to understand what's motivating them, what their fears are, what are the things that are going to stop them. Because I don't ever want to be in the position where when I close, I get a no. Yeah, I want to make sure I've absolutely nailed it before I go in. And sometimes that's one of the problems we have, is people will try and push through too quickly. So active listening is the core skill of negotiators. I look at 6 areas that we use to develop the listening within a team as a negotiator. So you've got sounds, nods, and gestures. You've got the listening position. You've got mirroring. You've got echoing and summaries and impression stating. Put it together as SMILES, as the acronym. When you put all those skills together, active listening isn't about listening. I should get that out straight away. People think active listening is about listening. It's absolutely nothing to do with listening. Active listening is the ability to keep a person talking without the need to ask a question. That's what active listening is for. Because what happens is we are very, very question driven. We think we get lots of information by asking questions. The skill is to ask a question and empty the person on their topic before we move on to the next question. And we empty them by using active listening. Conversations work my turn, your turn. So when I finish talking, it's your turn to start. Now you can take your turn in various different ways, but what we tend to do is take our turn by asking a question. When we ask a question, we steer the conversation in a different direction. We steer it in the direction we wanted to take it, not the direction the person we're communicating with wanted to take us. Quite often as well, the question that we ask gives more away about us than it does the answer that we're given, because of the way we ask the question. Listen to people when they ask you a question. If it's important to them, their energy goes up, their pace picks up. The way they ask you the question tells you that it's important to them. You're giving stuff away. Ask the question, empty them using active listening by keeping them on their topic. So what do we think makes what's the difference, do we think, between a good communicator and an exceptional communicator? Anyone wants to jump in?
I think too busy active listening, Kevin.
Too busy. Yeah, no problem. Being present is. Have people heard of the unconscious competence paradigm? I know it's difficult because this camera's off. Those that I can see, I'm guessing people drive. Yeah. So okay. So I'll use driving analogy to explain unconscious competence to you, because when you look at it online, it's a 4-leveled pyramid, with the top level being unconsciously competent. So when you look at driving as an analogy, when you were 8 years old, you didn't know that you couldn't drive. If that makes sense. You were unconsciously incompetent. You didn't know you couldn't do it. 17 years old comes up. You get your provisional driving license. If your parents were as daft as I was, you put L plates on your own car and they take your children out in your own car. Brilliant. You take them to a supermarket that's closed. You take them to a retail park that's closed, some massive space where you're not going to hit anything. Yeah. And they sit you in the driver's seat and they talk you through the controls and they talk you through this mystical thing that you have to find called a biting point. Yeah. And when you find the biting point, then you'll know how to drive. And the first time you lift the clutch and find it, you're now consciously incompetent. You know you can't drive. If you're lucky, the car stalls. If you're unlucky, it carries on. And all of a sudden, 15 miles an hour feels like 70. You panic like mad and it's all gone to pieces. But through lessons and through practice, we get better and better. Some people do. We get better and better. Then we get to test day. We can drive. Yeah. We know what gear we're in, but we've got to think about it. We know we've got to check the mirrors. We've got to think about it. And we can do it, but we have to think about it. Now we're consciously competent. And then the model takes us to unconscious competence. Now, every one of you who's driven for a while will have done this. You arrive at work, you arrive at a friend's house, you arrive back home, and as you pull up outside, the voice in your head says, how the hell did I get here? You've got no recollection of that journey whatsoever. Because now we know instinctively whether we'll get through the gap. Our speed creeps up a little bit. But we don't have to think about it. When you look at the model, this is where it says we should all be in our job. That we should be unconsciously competent. We can do it stood on our head. I disagree completely with that. Because very quickly, you can slip back to being unconsciously incompetent. When you throw an ego in there, it gets in the way even more. And we pick up bad habits. We stop listening to people. We start trying to enforce our position on them. If I was to say to you that Matt and the team have managed to arrange, because of how quiet things are at the moment, that after this session, a driving examiner is going to come round to your house and retake you all on your test, who'd be happy to do it? Probably not many of you, because we pick up bad habits. Yeah. Speed creeps up. We cut corners. If you drive a BMW, you don't need indicators anymore. Yeah. We all just pick up those bad habits. The difference between good and being exceptional is the next level. Conscious excellence. Switching on. If you think of sticking with driving, Lewis Hamilton, yeah, 7 times Formula One world champion. Drive around a circuit, 50 to 70 laps, 19 to 27 corners, 200 miles an hour, can do it within a 1/10 of a 100th of a second every time. He doesn't do it by turning up on a Sunday and saying, chuck us the keys. Yeah, I don't think they have keys, but he doesn't turn up and think, oh God, lap 30 already. Didn't realize I was there. He switches on and stays switched on. As a negotiator, in your role, going meeting clients, switch on. don't drop into the danger of going, here we go again. I say to negotiators, the first time you walk out and the first thought going through your mind is, here we go again, it's time to give up, because you're no longer sharp with it. Stay switched on. We talk about level 1 and level 2. Move yourself to level 2. Level 2 is thinking about everything that is being said, the impact of the words, the energy within the word. These are the things I'm listening for. I'm listening for the energy drop off, or the pick up on a certain syllable in a word or a sentence. The most difficult negotiation I did, other than the shotgun, was with an 8-year-old boy who was on the roof of a building, going to take his own life. And I got a phone call as the on-call negotiator, and the briefing I got was that this young lad had gone onto the roof. He was threatening to jump off the roof. He was kicking at people whenever they tried to get near him, and there was a real concern that he was going to fall. He'd got a number of mental health issues, should we say. And when I put the phone down, I thought, oh my God, how the hell am I going to deal with this? Because we're used to dealing with adults. We're used to people with life experience that we can tap into, that we can find that common ground with people. Here was an 8-year-old boy. So I rang the on-call psychologist that we work with, and I said, hi, it's Kev. I'm turning out to an incident. It's an 8-year-old boy. He's on a roof, kicking out, etc., etc., etc. He's got, one of the issues he had was ADHD. He's got ADHD. He's got this. He's got this. And he's got this. I need some advice. And he repeated it all back to me, and then said, I haven't got a clue. Not my area of expertise, which it wasn't. His area of expertise was a completely different area. He said, I will find out for you, and I'll get back to you in 15 minutes. I said, look, I'm 10 minutes out. I need a response within 10 minutes. He rang me back 10 minutes later and said, the best I can give you is this. He will present like he's in trouble. He will have grown up being in trouble. The best I can give you is don't let him think he's in trouble. So when I arrived, I decided I was going to climb onto the roof, which isn't something we would normally do. Not least of which because, believe it or not, I am actually scared of heights, so not the best place for me. But I went up and I sat on the roof. And I decided I wasn't going to engage with him. I decided I was going to let him engage with me, give him the control. And he was running backwards and forwards over this roof. And every time, and when I say running, I mean sprinting. And every time he got to about 6 to 8 feet from the edge of the roof, he would jump in the air and he would land with his feet right on the edge of the roof. And it was the longest 2 minutes of my life while he ran up and down this roof. And then he stopped and he said, who are you? Remember the line? My name's Kev. I'm just trying to find out what's got you here today. I just want to get you home safely. We talked about, the top and bottom was, he'd asked a girl out at break time at school who'd not just said no, but she'd ridiculed him in front of his friends. Because of some of the issues he had, he'd ruminated with it and it became a real issue for him. We talked about that. We talked about school. We talked about his parents. He lived with his grandparents. We talked about all sorts of things over a period of time. In between, he would get up and run around. We talked about climbing. One of the first things I always say is, have you got up here? And when they tell me, just so I know we can get down safely afterwards. And what I'm saying there is, I know you're not coming down just yet, but you are going to be coming down. So just planting those little seeds. And we talked about a tree that that you could see from the roof. And he said, I've been to the top of that. I said, well, I'll be honest, I'm scared of heights now. I said, I've probably gone up when I was younger, but not now. And he said, well, why have you come up then? I said, well, I told you I'll come up to make sure you're okay and to get you down safely. Right. Carried on talking. Right out of the blue, in the middle of the sentence, he said this to me. What time is it? And the energy change was noticeable. The T of time spat out quickly. And for me as a negotiator, gold dust. Why the urgency? Why the T of time? Has he got to be in at a certain time? Is there a program on TV? What is it? What's the importance of it? If you're not listening, you miss it. And you hear what time it is and you tell them. but the urgency was in that. This is what we are, when we talk about elite listening, these are the things we're listening for. No different for you guys. When you speak to clients, their energy will change, or it will drop off when they're disengaging with you. Recognize it quickly. And I said to this young lad, I said, I get the impression that you've got to be in at a certain time. And he said, yeah, I've got to be in for 9:30. I said, well, let's get you down there and get you home before your grandma comes looking for you. And he turned around and said, yeah, okay. Next words out of his mouth, bless him with this, God's honest truth. Next words out of his mouth with this, are you all right getting down? And I said, I'll be honest, no, I'm not. And he held my hand. From my perspective, I've got control of him. From his perspective, he was genuinely caring and wanted to help me down. The point is this, at any point, he could have slipped and fallen. And it's debatable whether he would have survived if he had. My job and your job is to get the deal done as quickly and safely as possible, because at any moment, at any time, it can change. Listening gets you there quicker. Listening gets you there much quicker, but you have to switch on. You have to be on top of your game. I'm mindful of time, so I want to just finish with this with you. Have you all got mobile phones with you? Okay. What I want you to do is hold your phone in your hands like this. Okay. Now I want you to think in your mind's eye, close your eyes, and I want you to think about the person in your life that means the absolute most to you. Take a moment just to think about them and picture them in your mind's eye. In a moment, your phone is going to ring. When it does, their profile picture will come up. Usually a happy memory, usually a smiling picture of them. And you'll get a little lift in your heart that you do when you see that picture. And you'll swipe across expecting to hear their voice. What you're going to hear is them screaming down the phone, begging for help, asking you to come and get them. And then someone is going to take the phone off them, come on the phone and say this to you. You do exactly as we say, or you will never fucking see them again. We will ring you back. Bang, phone goes down. The next phone call you make is to the police. And you get told a specialist officer is going to come and see you. The specialist officer is a hostage negotiator. Let me ask you this question. When you get the knock on that door, having received that phone call, how well trained do you want that negotiator to be? How well trained would you expect them to be? And having been the person who's knocked on that door on countless occasions and seen the absolute abject fear in a family's face, there is an incredible amount of pressure to be at the top of your game. Whatever environment you work in, and I'll ask you this, why is it any different for you guys? Whatever environment you work in, be the best you can be. Listening is the most powerful tool you've got if you tune it on. If you don't, you will miss things and you will not be as good as you could be. Listening is the key to communication, not smart questions, listening. If anyone's wondering who I would want when I open the door, Liam Neeson. He's brilliant in a Kidnap. Really good. Much better than me. Matt, I'm mindful of time and you wanted to get some questions in.
Liam Neeson, good one. It's made me laugh. Kevin, that was really interesting. Thanks. I tell you what, it's remarkable though. I was absorbing all of it, loved it. And then all of a sudden I start to look in the chat room and there are a couple of questions that have come through to me. And you were talking about the young lad up on the roof.
Yes.
I just couldn't focus, and I come back to you minutes later and I'm like, shit, I've missed some of that. It's a really difficult thing, isn't it? To do something else while I was off. I couldn't do it.
That undivided attention is really important. And one of the listening modes is passive listening. And we all tune in and out. The best example of passive listening, there's a thing called cocktail party syndrome. So cocktail party syndrome is when you're stood talking to someone in a crowded room and you're really focused on this conversation, and then someone off to the left says your name. And immediately the person in front of you becomes white noise and you tune in to what's being said at the side of you. Why are they talking about me? And what you've done is you've dropped into a passive listening mode. And that is listening to the voice in your head, not the person. We naturally do that, but it's recognizing when you have, and the listening position is a technique of switching yourself back into the room to get yourself switched on. You will miss things because people will say things that are important to your agenda and you'll tune into it and miss what comes after.
I'm going to ask a couple of people to ask questions themselves, Kevin, if that's okay. Yeah, first of all, yeah. Tom Downing, I know you're there. We were chatting away. I'm going to ask you to you should just appear magically on screen when you talk, Tom. But do you want to put your question to Kevin directly?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, firstly, Kevin, fascinating. Thanks for your time.
Okay.
There's a book called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy, which I've just finished. And one point that she makes, which is related to some of the things you're talking about, is most people in a conversation are thinking about what they're going to say next, rather than listening to what the person is saying. Therefore, you're not truly listening. And ever since reading it, I know when I do it, but I really struggle to try to get out of that habit. So I wanted to see if there's any tips to try to break that habit.
I'm going to say, come on the listening program that we're doing in February. Yes, active listening is what will keep you switched on. So the listening position itself, as I say, we naturally tune in and out. So it is that being able to put yourself in the position of switching back on. Your body position is a big thing. When you look at mirroring, you can end up mirroring accidentally. Yeah, and all the skills that we use as active listening skills, people do naturally. The problem is if you're doing it, if it's happening by accident, you're not using it. It's happening by accident. So your body position can switch you off, which is then when your brain takes over. How you're sat forward as you are, that's switched on. So if you feel yourself relaxed in a conversation, sit yourself forward. It will bring you back into the room. I'm going to have a read of that book. I've not heard of that one, so I'm going to have a read of that. But it is most people listen to respond and not understand. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. We had another one, but I think you've answered it. But another one here from Jason. Jason, do you want to ask Kevin yourself? If not, I'll ask for you.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for your time. It's been really fascinating to listen to. I just want to know how you cope with nerves and butterflies in the stomach, because I can't imagine you could do that job and not have that happening all the time.
No, it's it's accepting that you're going to be nervous, and nerves are a good thing. Nerves keep you switched on without a shadow of a doubt. It's controlling them without a shadow of a doubt. In relation to controlling it, is practicing your delivery. Your opening line is the core thing. When you start to speak to somebody, those first 30 seconds are nerve-wracking. Then you settle into your flow. So having your practiced how you're going to introduce yourself and giving yourself time to do that in your day job will give you the confidence to get going. And once you're flowing, then your natural style kicks in. It is those initial things. Yes, it's nerve-wracking. It's channeling that into a positive. We used to talk about the late night radio DJ voice of consciously slowing yourself down to that low, slow pitch, so that under stress, when your vocal cords tighten up, you actually come out sounding quite normal, not like Barry White.
Thanks, Kevin. Oh, we just had another one through from Adrian. Adrian, if you want to ask yourself, please do, and you'll pop up on screen. If not, I know not everyone can do it. I'll ask it for you. I'll give you a couple of seconds to.
Yep. Hello.
Here we go.
Hi, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. It's been yeah, really insightful. I was just wondering, are there any differences at all between negotiations in writing versus speech, in your opinion?
Yes, the same skill sets apply without a shadow of a doubt. They do. What's lost in the written form is context. So you have to be very careful about word choice. The best example is my wife. She's one of three sisters, and she's the eldest, youngest one, little bit of a wayward child, and the three of them have a group chat. Their mum's got dementia, and they have a group chat. And quite often, because of the relationship, and this is your listening modes as well, because of the relationship, she'll often say to me, "Have you seen what she's written now?" And then she'll read the message in like a really pissed off voice and say, "Look what she sent now." And I say, "Give us the phone," and I'll read it differently. So that is what you lose in the written context. The advantage of written over verbal is people see the world differently. So what I mean by that is you will hear people who are audible, who say things like, "Oh, it sounds to me like I can hear where you're coming from." So there's audible references. You get people that are visual that can say, "Oh, I can see where you're coming from. I'm trying to get a clearer picture." Those kind of things. So there's different ways in which people see the world. That comes out in their written language. So for anyone who's had the email and it's gone for the too long didn't read, yeah, a lot of that is because it's not written in your code. So negotiating written wise, you can pick that out easier and reflect it back, echo it, mirror it back to them in the written word, so that they engage with the writing. Negotiating via social media, completely different, more complex and more difficult, but something that we do have to train for these days. Does that answer it, Adrian?
It does, yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
Adam Buxton, are you there? I know you've got a question.
Hi guys. Yeah, again, Kevin, thank you so much for a great meeting, great presentation. Really gobsmacked, it's brilliant. I've got a question for you about percentages. So as advertising, marketing, whatever agencies, we prepare our meetings to within an inch of their life. We prepare, we do dry runs, we present to people cold in the agency, you know, we really try and hone our craft. But there's a second opinion in the industry, which is about reading the room and freewheeling. I'm putting you on the spot here, but what percentage, do you think there is a percentage? Is it 75 prepared, 25% reading the situation? What advice would you have about that?
It really does depend on the circumstance. So when I think of a barricaded siege negotiation or a kidnap negotiation, like you, we will plan it to the nth degree. We will plan our responses. We will plan around what challenges we're likely to face. Crisis intervention is you are face to face and you are kind of freestyling, if you like, and you've got to have that mental agility. I don't think I could put a percentage on it. For me, in your world, the level of planning that you go into it and practicing and dry running it, you are automatically putting yourself in a confirmatory listening because you're on your agenda. And when you're on your agenda, you will tune out what the other persons are saying, what the questions they're asking you. When you've practiced and practiced and practiced, when they ask you a question, you will respond based on you will tune it into how it fits with you, that confirmatory listening. So practice, I'm going to give you a real fudge answer here. Practice is really important. And not so much the practicing what you're going to say, but practicing what the challenges are that you're likely to face, what are the kind of questions that I am likely to face. And we talk about, in my world, bunches of five. So I know when I turn up to a siege that I'm going to want them to let the hostage out. I know that I'm going to want them to put the knife down if that's what they're armed with. And I know that they're going to ask me to have the firearms team move back and they'll want to speak to the person in charge. So those are the kind of things that I know I'm going to get asked. So we will have 5 reasons why they should let a hostage out. 5 reasons why they should put the knife down. So whenever you get challenged, if you haven't prepped around the challenges you're going to get, because you're on your agenda, when they ask you a left field question, what comes out is as, possiblies, maybes, and the language is quite foggy. When we've prepped around it, and there's always going to be things that do come in, which is where the mental agility comes in. But if we've prepped around it and got our responses, and we've practiced them, they come out more confident. And if they disagree with the first one, you move to the second one. If they disagree with the second one, you move to the third one. And by now you're becoming really convincing because they've run out of counter arguments, which is the reason we have 5. So prep is important. What I would say is don't over prep. I suppose an example, again, crisis negotiation. The only thing I wanted to know was their name if we have it. Have they said anything? Have they asked for anything? That's all I want to know. Because when you do a lot of digging and when you do a lot of prep and intel and things like that, what you're getting is other people's values and beliefs and perspective on the situation, which then taints your delivery. Example of it in the extreme was I was reviewing a negotiator deployment where a young girl, she survived. She jumped into a river and was fortunately rescued by the fire service. But she'd gone to hospital to be sectioned with her parents, and she was getting sectioned. The bed was taking too long, and so she left and said, "I'm not waiting any longer. I'm going." And she left. The negotiator, she was found on a bridge. Police were deployed. Negotiator got deployed. He arrived, and on his recorder, he describes the scene. Then he goes over to the commander and says, "I'm recording. I'll just have to get in a brief of what's going on." "Oh yeah," and he gets told that story. The good news is the bed's ready. So as soon as she's back off the bridge, we can get her straight into the ward. No problem at all. It's all ready for her now, waiting. The negotiator walked over, and this is what he said: "My name's Paul. I believe you've been waiting for a bed at the hospital. I've got some great news for you. The bed, that was all he got out because she jumped." When we spoke to her afterwards, all the wanting to be sectioned, all the wanting to go into hospital was somebody else's view of the situation, not hers. She didn't want to be there. So that's the danger for me of listening too much to other people. There is a real skill of reading the room and working out what it is that they're asking for.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much. I mean, just to say, we do, it's quite funny, but we do role play throwing uncomfortable questions at each other, which is my favorite part of the preparation. But I think the learning for me is maybe we should do it a bit more, actually. But thank you so much.
Train for reality is what we say.
Thanks. I've got one more because we're about on time. I know there's Ollie, but his Wi-Fi is in and out, so I said I'd ask for him, Kevin. If you feel that the other person or persons in the conversation are starting to switch off, what can you do to re-engage them?
That's around getting it back on their agenda. Getting it back, kind of getting really technical now. We look at whether someone's engaged, avoidant or combative. So on particular subjects, to get them re-engaged, I would look at a topic that I know they're engaged with me on. So if they've become avoidant and are disengaging with me, I would move the conversation back to a topic that I know they're engaged with, if that makes sense. So I would do that by use of a summary. So a summary is a perfect way of steering the conversation back to where you want to take it. A lot of the time, what we do is we will summarize what somebody said to us and then close it off with a closed question of, is that right? And now we're back to asking questions. At the end of a summary, the skill of using a summary is to summarize what the person said. So if you feel they're disengaging with you, have in your head a topic area where you know they're engaged, summarize what they've just told you, and at the end of the summary should be a line similar to, before we were talking about, boom, takes you back to the bit that they were engaged with and get them to open up again. get them to re-engage before we revisit the bits that they were turning off from us. People will modulate between engaging and disengaging. If it's an area they're uncomfortable with, they'll move you away. Don't get me wrong, you've got to go back there. My job's to go to the dark places. But I'm not going to get to the point where they switch off from me. I will take it back to something I know they're engaged with before I go back to the avoidant or combative stuff.
Right.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think those sort of you called it a technical answer. I think those technical answers are fascinating and really interesting. We hit 2 minutes past. Our timing is good. That, Kevin, was fascinating. I really enjoyed that. Do you know what? You're a very easy person to listen to. It was really, really interesting. Thank you so much for giving up the time. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We had lots of people join and lots of really nice comments as well saying thank you. We will follow up.
If you can send that an email about I'm really listening to my children, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, and you did the same to mine. We'll follow up with a link. A few people have asked about the course that you're doing to go into this a little bit deeper. It's called The Power of Active Listening. It's on the 23rd of February. So we'll make sure that everybody gets a direct link to that. But if not, you can find it on our website and book up, go into those things a little bit deeper with Kevin. Look, have a lovely evening, everyone. Really, really interesting. Kevin, again, thanks so much for your time.
No, thank you, guys. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Amazing.
Thank you so much. Really, really useful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for that. Cheers.